Alright, hello and welcome to another ComfyUI tutorial. Today we're going to be covering a 3-pass workflow. Now, in the process of this particular video, I'm going to show you how to build the system below. I'm going to walk you through some of the stuff about what a 3-pass system is, how it relates to single pass and double pass systems, and some of the pros and cons of various ones. And I will also be talking about stuff to do with how prompts can be used to control things, how to prompt things that would seem to be impossible normally, and that kind of thing. And it's a bit of a freeform kind of ramble about this kind of stuff while I build a workflow, basically. So if you want to cut to the end of the kind of building process, it might be a good idea if you already know how to build stuff and you're confident with this stuff, but I would definitely check out the bit where I discuss how a pass works and how it's kind of used in ComfyUI. So yeah, more news after everything as well. For those who watch the whole video, there will be more information at the end. Okay, let's talk about passes and kind of what actually a pass is. So when you are running Stable Diffusion, you have your loader and it loads up all the information you want, and then you run it through a sampler. And when you run stuff through a sampler, it is going through a pass. So basically we're doing a rendering pass in the process of making an image. So if you have more than one sampler, you have more than one pass. But that's only the case if the samplers are connected to each other. If they're by themselves, with their own empty latent, it's simply a single pass. So if you had like 10 samplers and each one just grabbed from the empty latent, it wouldn't be a 10-pass system, it would be a 1-pass system. It only becomes 2 passes when they're connected to each other in series. So the first default setup that you start with is going to be basically pretty simple. You're going to have your loader over here. You'll have a sampler over here, and this will pass to an image saving node of some kind. And it's going to have the prompt as well over here somewhere. It'll be between, so you'll have a prompt. And the prompt, of course, steers the sampler here and creates the image. So that's 1 pass. So this here is 1 pass. 1 pass. And if you are doing a 2-pass system, you can have a loader, going to go to a sampler, and this sampler is going to connect to a second sampler. And then it will output as an image. Now, we'll have, so that'll be 1 and that'll be 2. And in between here, we might have things like anything which affects a pixel images or latent images. It could be upscaling. Usually it's upscaling in this kind of a process. This could be color grading. This could be bringing in other images and merging them in. Could even be animation. You could have all kinds of stuff in here. But between each of these samplers, if there's 2 samplers, then it's a 2-pass system. It doesn't really matter what's in between, but that's kind of how passes work. So 2-pass system, 2 samplers basically. Now most 2-pass systems will have a single prompt as well. Some might have 2 prompts. Really depends what you're doing within a 2-pass system. But most are making simple images, doing an upscale, and then doing a single prompt. And that's basically how 2-pass systems work. Okay, let's have a look at 3-pass system. So a 3-pass system, got a loader, it passes to a sampler, passes to another sampler, and it passes to a third one, which then passes off to an image. Now, the difference between a 2-pass and a 3-pass is that in a 3-pass system, if you are running the same prompt over and over again, you will start to get issues by the time you reach the third sampler. You could have color problems. You can have quality issues as well. Usually they don't really crop in unless you're not changing the image enough between the two samplers. So if you were just passing straight, it's generally going to cause more issues than if you have an upscaler or are changing things in other ways. But generally speaking, if you're doing 3-pass systems, you're probably using more than one prompt. And in this case, with the method I'm going to explain, each one of these samplers gets its own prompt. So for each sampler, prompt. Now between each sampler in this case, we're doing the same kind of thing. You're doing a 2-pass. You have upscalers up in here. You have image grading stuff in here to change colors. Maybe you're blending in images, putting in graphics, putting in fonts. You could bring in branding or logos, that kind of stuff, put it in, and then it'll run it over with a sampler, and it should generate changes in it. Now, the disadvantages of this kind of setup is, one, it's kind of the bugs with having, if you use the same prompt 3 times, but additionally it takes longer because each time you run through a sampler, you're increasing the render times. Each time you upscale, you increase the render times as well. So this kind of a setup can be significantly longer than this kind of a setup, and it will always be way longer than a single pass. Now, why would we actually build a system in this way with 3 kind of prompts and that kind of thing? Well, that's because we can use some different techniques that a 2-pass and a 1-pass can't really use too well. So in this one, the first step, the first kind of pass, is generally speaking is going to be kind of a rough sketch. So it's going to be a rough sketch of what you're actually trying to build. And this could be something which is created out of composition, so just light and dark. It could be specific objects which kind of look like what we're going to turn something into later. So a cat sitting on a couch, right? And then you could change that cat later on in your workflow into a raccoon or something like that. The idea is that we're providing the kind of the seed for later generation, for later passes. Now in the second one, the second pass, its sole job is basically to transform this kind of first pass into something different. So we change the prompt usually significantly in the second pass, and so it'll do stuff like if you had a spider in your first image and you said in your second image that you wanted a dog, you would get a furry spider, like with dog legs, right? Stuff which is really hard to actually prompt. Like if you try to actually prompt that from the get-go, like a spider dog, you won't get what you want. It's just going to do a spider basically. And through this process, we can actually make changes that are generally impossible to prompt. And that's kind of one of the other cool powers that this kind of a setup has. You can do that kind of stuff in a 2-pass prompt, but what you can't do in a 2-pass prompt is you can't make it look way better. So the third part of this kind of a layout is basically designed to upgrade your image, upscale it, do refining passes, make it look better, make it look more like whatever art style you've chosen. You can change the art style. You could start as an oil painting and go to a photo and then go to an anime if you wanted to. It's within its power to change things in a certain amount each time. And generally speaking, between 1, 2, and 3, we're also changing the noise levels. So the first one's going to be like 1 because it's the first image. The second one's going to be around 50% or somewhere in that region, maybe a little bit higher, depends how much you need to change it. And the last one is going to be really low denoise because it's just tuning it and upgrading the image a bit. So yeah. That's what we're going to build. We're going to build a system which does this. I'm going to build it from scratch. So, and I'll kind of I'll discuss this stuff that I've just explained here along the way. And in the process, hopefully you'll learn a bit more. You can skip the building stage if you understand it as I've explained it, and you can just cut to the end and see how the prompting works if you want to skip that. Anyway, on to the next bit. All right, so let's begin with the building process. We'll get rid of the stuff we don't need, which is everything. We'll add in a bus node. You need some kind of a bus node because if you want to do modular setups or modular stuff, if you want to build stuff in a way that like is organized and not so messy and not tangled, you need to have buses. And it doesn't mean you need to use them all the time, but they're really useful if you set them up properly. And buses basically carry the information that you need everywhere else in your workflow in one place, and so that you can get access to it wherever, and you don't have to wire everywhere. So the first step is our load checkpoint. We have a bus as well. We're going to need access to what's called an empty latent. So I'm not going to use the empty latent node. I'm going to use a ratio, the comfy role aspect ratio node. And the reason for that is we get access to this width and height value here. And we get access to the empty latent. We get access to the batch size stuff. And we can send the batch size out of this node as well. And basically it's just got more features, got all the kind of preset stuff as well, which means less messing around with, if I remember, values and typing in numbers and that kind of thing, which just makes it quicker and more efficient. And we plug the empty latent into our latent here. And in most cases, this will be sufficient for a loader. If you are using certain SDXL models, you'll want to make sure that you have a loader as well. And the reason for that is some VAE which are packaged with some models are not the right one. So it's a good idea to have a separate to your load checkpoint. Now, you could use an efficiency loader if you want to have all of this stuff. The only problem is efficiency loader doesn't have this comfy role aspect. So I'm just using this and the other things. The one disadvantage to all of this is we do need a clip skip. Hang on, so we need, what's it called again? Set last. This is how you do clip skip for anyone who is familiar with 811. Clip skip is basically, it's a way of telling your clip, the clipped encode stuff, the prompting stuff, how to treat the words that you speak in a sentence, where to stop paying attention. And usually SDXL ones tend to want to be on -2 for whatever reason. Yeah. All right, so now we have a loader basically here. And we will go select it all and go add group for selected nodes, which will put everything in a little group. So this is a loader module for anyone who wants to know how to build that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we have a loader set up. We need to make the next component of this kind of a workflow, which is we need to build 3 sets of samplers. And we're just going to build one and then we'll copy it out and then we'll change some settings. So first we need a Ksampler. And we also need another one of these bus nodes. So I'm just going to hold Alt and drag this out. And I'm going to connect it up. So if we connect this line here on a bus node, we don't have to connect all the other ones. So it's a lot quicker. And I like to put my bus up in that corner and my Ksampler here, which lets me pass stuff that way if I want. And there's some other stuff that we need with our little sampler setup. We're going to need a encoder. And the reason we're including a VAE encoder, even though this is the first one, is because we're copying it out. We're going to need it in the later one, so we may as well build it into the first one. And then it's just, we can just copy paste and not use it if we don't want to. Make sure you hook these all up to the right hand side of your little bus kind of thing here, because this is where all the information comes in to your module here. And although we have access to positive and negative here, because it's not plugged in over here, we don't plug them in. I'm going to plug in the model here like so. And now we'll get to work on the prompting component of this. So what we need to do is we need to add a clip. Add a clip SDXL. And the SDXL clips, if you're using 1.5, just replace them with the standard clip text encode and it'll work fine. And even if you're using just the standard clip text encode, it'll work with an XDSL model. There's limited bonuses to this, but I've noticed a very slight quality increase possibly. How much of that is the placebo effect, I don't know, but there you go. Now, because we're using clip text encode SDXL, we do need to deal with the clip G and clip L texts, which are the two prompts you use for these. I'm going to use a node from JPS, I think it is, where we get rep. Hang on. Oh, rep. We want the where is it? SDXL prompt handling from JPS. And what this basically does is it provides a little adapter from one prompt input into two prompt inputs. Which is also, if you decide to plug in an L into the front of this, it'll work, and you can mix it in a few different ways, which gives you some more options. We'll sort out this clip text encode SDXL. It needs to have the G and the L set input. We plug those all in. Because I'm doing this from scratch, I may as well explain. You can right click on a node, and you can obviously change the values into inputs, which lets you just plug stuff into it. In case anyone how I'm doing this at this point, it should be a bit more obvious, but if you're just starting out, I'm not sure I'd be picking up things with this particular tutorial. It's a little bit more advanced. Maybe I should cover that right at the start of the video, but who knows. All right, so now we have this component and this component here plugged into each other, and we're going to copy them because we do need a negative one, and we're going to color them red. And then these ones can be green. Now these take up a lot of room, so typically I minimize them with the little gray button. I do need to plug the negative in. And clip. Right. Now we have those, and this will be where we bring our prompts in on these two nodes here. And typically I also minimize these, but I'll keep them up for now because we're going to plug stuff into them anyway. All right. So this gives us the core of a sampler component, and we're going to use a VE decode here. Plug in the VE, drag out a preview image, and then we can select this and go add group, which gives us a nice little box for our module. Now I like to put a rerouted image straight through the VE decode to here so that we can use that later. And I also like to pass the latent line as well. The reason for that is it's a little bit more multi-use, and you can just plug stuff straight into it and it'll go. All right, so are we missing any inputs? I don't think we are. The only thing we're missing actually is we need to plug this latent in here because we're not using input from image in this one. Okay, so that is the basic setup for how you would set up a modular kind of case sampler and loader. So it's basically good to go other than the prompt. But we're going to do the other case sampler modules now. So we go Control C, Control V, and then another one, Control V. We'll add a group for each as well. Add group for selected. And now we have 3 set up and pretty much ready to go, other than some wiring between them. Because I am using a bus setup, we do need to pass the bus along. It's a good idea to set it up so that these come off like this rather than passing from one module to another. It's a good idea to keep them off of a central line, because then you're not accidentally bring in something you change in one module into another module that you don't want. Just a kind of it's the neatness and kind of an organizational thing. Now, because we are going to need to use a different prompt for each of these, as you can see, we have this set up to receive prompt, but we're not actually sending it prompts. We need to use text node. So you could use just about anything which sends out a string. I tend to use text multiline from Wasu. Type multi, and then I go down to the bottom and click go. And this gives me. Now you could put these texts in each one of these as well. You could set them up centrally and send the information along through kind of a little bus down here for the text. It's really up to you. I'm going to put a little text boxes in each of these modules because it's a little bit neater that way. So I'll hook up this like so. Now typically, I might actually hook up the, yeah, why not? We'll hook up the negative that way. So the negative is going to go up here. It's going to be red. And minimize that. Up. And minimize that. That's plugged in. Okay. That'll give us, set it up properly. Okay, I'm kind of doing this on the fly at this point. All right. Now we're going to set up so that the text multiline for negative gets passed along this line here, and it goes all the way through, and it goes to each one of these modules. And you don't have to do it this way. You can have individual ones if you want, but I don't feel like copy pasting things in, and mostly my negatives stay the same on everything if I'm doing them anyway. It doesn't always end up that way, but if it does, I can always change it after the fact. All right, so minimize you. Yeah. And I need just plugging in these prompt boxes into each of these modules now. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so now that each one has its own prompt box, we have one negative plugged into each one of these as well. And of course, you could wire all these up in one place if you just want them next to each other, or like this, how they're in each of these modules. Advantage of modules being you can mute the entire lot if you want, do whatever you want with these things. So, how do we do the connecting these kind of modules up? Because you want to set these up in a specific way to make sure that you are taking advantage of it being a three-pass system, and that is that we want to iterate towards higher levels of detail over the course of this. Now, if you're just testing out ideas, you might want to dial all the settings that I cover here down, but kind of for the get-go, the idea is it will be an upscaling process. So we're going to need to use upscale by, and I'm using upscale by because I don't have to set specific pixel values in here. It's not a destructive upscale. If you, the latent upscale is a destructive lossy upscale. You lose information, but you sometimes gain more information because it adds noise in the process of upscaling. Whereas the upscale Standard pixel upscaler does not add noise, which means that if you want to add noise, add more detail, you do need to add your own noise. But because you're adding your own noise, it's a lot more controllable over what that noise actually is. That could be, you can change colors, you can change the kinds of noise you're using, like Perlin noise, which looks like clouds, or there's all kinds of options available if you're using pixels instead of latent. With latent, you're just stuck with one thing, which is the method which they use, which is kind of this noise that looks kind of like checkers, like dark checkers. And yeah, you just want more control. If you can have it, you may as well get it, right? And we're going to be upscaling by 125. This, and it goes into the VE code. You could send it into the bus if you wanted, but it's right next to it. So, and the second one is now hooked up. And I'm going to do the same thing in the second one. Now, typically in here, so we have the first kind of upscaler. It's kind of more standard. It's more just straight upscaler. The second one, often you're going to want to put, like you will start wanting to put things like color tuning, color grading, and other settings, and put them in here, because this end one is going to be like a finalizing step. So it's like your end pass, which means you want to make sure you have your color set up properly, your detail and stuff like that. And it's a good idea to have, just like in between each of these modules, have like a little kind of a setup which does certain things. So you could do stuff in here like strip out the color and turn it into a black and white image or whatever. I'm going to add a levels as an example of that. Oops. Now the levels node is used to change where the black and white levels of the image are, which means you can make the darks darker and kind of increase the kind of the shadow depth, so that things which were kind of mid-tones and stuff become darker and darker as you tune the black level up or white level down. It will get more white closer. Hard to explain. Think of white as being at 100% right now at 255, and if you lower that value down like 150, you'll get more and more white in it. And with black is at 0, so if you raise it up, you'll get more and more black in the image as well. I'm going to switch black to about 30, and the reason for that is, depending on the kind of images you make, you might want to change this to different settings. I like to run this kind of thing if I'm making horror art, which I tend to do a lot. It lets me get more kind of depth into things, and it can help bring out the quality of the. And we connect that to the VE encode. So at the moment, what it's going to do is it's going to load our model and stuff up here. And the second one, the first one, it's just going to run everything. It's going to upscale it by 25%. Then it's going to do another pass, and then it's going to upscale it by another 25%. And it's going to tune the bright dark levels and send out another image at the end. But we have to set up these samplers now, which are the ones between these. So the first one, the first pass, is a little different than you're normally going to want. So normally when you're making images, you try and get the best image you can from the get-go, and that's not how 3-pass systems work. With a 3-pass system, the first image you create is not the image you want. It's the image that you want to use to get the next step, which means that we want to make sure that it's quick, so that it happens really fast. It doesn't take up too much time, because we're going to be changing a huge amount of it. There's no point concentrating all our time into generating a good image, because most of it's going to be gone, or it'll be changed significantly by the end. So keeping the steps down is a good move. So I might go to 13 steps. The sampler type, I'm not really going to mess with. That's something that's up to kind of the artist in question, you basically, as to what your preferences are. EULA is a good bog standard default one. It'll just do what you want roughly. you know, there's no necessarily bad things about it. It just, yeah, it works. So I'm going to use it. Scheduler, using normal's fine unless you're actually doing in like a image to image stuff. Second passes and stuff, you might switch this to Keras. It's really up to you. Anyway, so once you've got this step set to like say 13, you want to look at the CFG value. Now the CFG value, classifier free guidance they call it. It's designed to tell it how much you really want the prompt to be the way that you've typed it, and the higher it is, the more it will try that. Conversely, the colors get more and more messed up the higher you go, and if you go down, it'll resemble your prompt less. Colors will get a lot more washed out, a lot kind of more wishy-washy. In terms of art style, it can change the art style too. So the lower your CFG is, often it will go towards paintings, oil paintings, kind of messy stuff like that. If you go higher, it will go more towards photos and like high quality 3D images and that kind of thing. So I generally keep it a little bit lower because at the start we're just about composition, we're just about colors, shapes, light and dark really in this setup. It's not really designed to make the final image here, it's just making the kind of the idea of the image here. So being low is not a problem here. So I'm going to put it on 4. And denoise can be 1. And the next one, because it is essentially an image to image, this is the following step. And we are doing most of the grunt work in the first stage. In the middle stage, the idea is to shove it really hard towards a certain kind of layout, a certain kind of image, which means it needs to be somewhere in the middle ground in terms of denoise value. You could go with 0.5, you could go higher than that, you could go lower than that. It's really up to you. These values kind of you tune as you go as well. I'm going to set it at 51, which is just enough to cause large changes in the image without necessarily changing the composition. And because we're using composition in the first step, we're just basically changing the image a whole bunch in the second step using kind of the fact that this is just 5.1. So we're still using most of this in the first image. And in the final one, we're doing the same thing, but we're bringing the denoise way down. Probably under 0.3 would be your best bet. It's up to you, really. It depends hugely on what your final outcome desire is. If you want a really high-res image, you may even want to push a 4th step after this, which is designed just for upscaling. Up to you, really. But I'm just pushing it to 20 because we don't want to change the image a huge amount. We just want to clean it up in this final step. And so keeping the denoise low and then using a prompt specifically designed to clean it up, we can push the image just towards finalizing and cleaning everything, basically. So may as well put a prompt in and give it a go. So I'm going to do a cat sitting on a red box. And I'll just run that, why not? And I won't run anything in the other prompts, and we'll just go for it and we'll see what it does. Now without a prompt, these other following on ones will try to use what they see in the image kind of as part of the process of generating the image. So generally they'll stay similar to what the original initial image is, but they might change a few details and that kind of stuff, but generally they won't do a hugely awesome job without a prompt in. Put a prompt in them, you can change things. So it's successfully made a cat on a box, but you can see that the image is kind of messy, kind of blurry. It's not perfect, and that's fine. It was quick, which is what we want. Now the second one has gone through, it's slightly bigger in resolution, but you can see it's not really changed anything really. It's kind of cleaned a little bit of it up, but it's still going to look a bit noisy because it doesn't have any instructions. It's just generating the thing, basically. Essentially, we've asked it to dream in the first one of a cat, and in the second one it's got a cat, and so it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll have a look at this cat and I'll add more detail. Now this one's failed. Let me see, why has it failed? What have I done wrong today? What have I done wrong? It looks like, yeah, latent source wasn't plugged in. There we go, fixed it. Anyway, so basically it's going to do the same thing. So we may as well have a look and see what we can turn this original image into using a 3-part system. Now this is 5.1, which means it will actually change a fair bit of the image. So we could change this into probably a red box. Let's change it from a red box. We'll turn it into a red chest. Yeah, on a red treasure chest, why not? And on the third one, what do we want to turn the dog into? Maybe a bear. On a red house. Now, hopefully it won't change enough to change much of this in the third one. It probably won't change too much. But if we run it this time, it'd give us a cat box, good. And low quality, obviously. Pretty quick. Now this is running at, what's the resolution? 1024 by 1024. So it's going to quickly take a long time because you're up by 25%. So it's 1280 or something, and then again and again and again. As you can see, it was a cat on a box. Now it's a dog on a box. Tried to turn it into a treasure chest. The lid's got some curvature to it. There's some fittings and stuff like that on it, which weren't on this one. And now it's a dog. So if you can think of uses for that, like you're trying to get something to sit on something and it's just going, no, I'm not going to do that. You could, prompt something which will sit on a box and then turn it into that thing after the fact with a second pass. And that's the advantage of a 3-pass system, which is the idea is that you can change it over the course of things towards what you want. So this is actually given it the face of a bear. So this is a dog here, but if we look here, we see it's a bear, got bear claws, but the fur is, kind of dog-like. But it doesn't have enough strength to really push that towards being a full bear. So as you can see, it's a bear dog. And you'll see it's got high quality everything because we're upscaling over the course of the things. So that's a 3-pass workflow, and that's roughly what it does. The idea is you put in one image, and by the end you have a different image, but it's more like what you want. Now you could use this to do things that might be difficult to prompt. So you could put in, everyone at the moment in one of the discords I'm in is struggling to have someone picking their nose because it just won't do it. And I've tried using this system to do that, and it even struggles using this system. So as you can imagine, there's still things it's not going to want to do. Because if the base model is not trained to show a certain thing, or is trained to specifically not have that thing shown, it can be really tough to push it that way if it really doesn't want to do it. Which, if you really want to push it to that kind of thing, you may be entering the realm of needing to use LoRa's or second models, which I generally don't do too much because mostly you can prompt things. You don't really need these LoRa's and things too much. They're helpful if you want a specific thing, but otherwise prompting will do just about anything if you work hard at it. So I've shown you kind of the basics of it. So what about the more advanced kind of things you might do? So one of the things I often do is I might start on one art style and then push it to a different art style by the end. So I might do messy. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Thing of and spider and build grass poster dick spooky. Pretty sure that's spelled right. Yeah, just ignores it. Spooky, and we'll do some actual kind of quality settings as well on this. So, detailed, epic, masterpiece. Okay, and I'll ignore the other prompts for now, and maybe it'll make something weird. So we run this first step, we should get a spooky spider in a field. Scary spider. It's done it in a kind of oil painting style. Good. See, it's very oil painting, very kind of magic cards type deal. Okay, and in the second one, we're telling it we want a dog. So now we have a dog spider with many legs. So try prompting that by itself. Because it's very difficult to prompt that kind of thing without doing two steps. So yeah, that's one of the things you can do with these. But you do have to be careful because it will kind of go off and do weird stuff as well. Like it's less controllable unless you're really careful with the composition on the first step and tuning this second step specifically for what we do. So we have a spider. It obviously it can change things a fair bit. Well, let's have a bit of a change of this as well and make something really cool. So we'll do a house with spider legs across dick land, and we'll do photo UHD 8K and what else? Epic, realistic, photograph as well. Film frame. Adding a few of these quality things. You probably want to save the quality things for the final step, really, but I'm just putting them in there because why not? But basically, because if it's at like 0.2%, it's going to cover a lot of things. All of the quality settings will be overwritten, basically. So I'm just tuning for the central one now. So if we run this a second time, it'll rerun our first image again. I could use fix these, but I'm not gonna. Now the advantage of this kind of a setup where you're using multiple systems and you kind of tune these this way is that one, you can do stuff that's hard to prompt, and two, image quality becomes a lot more reliable because you have a base setup which is working, and then you move it along and it continues to work because the first image kind of worked, which is kind of an advantage of it. Now it hasn't really got a house, it's put houses in the background unfortunately, which means we need to do some work on this prompt here. We could also try and fix it on the final prompt by just control copy, pasting it in here. Now it's going to try and make that a bear, so I'm just going to cancel it. And I might fix this prompt a little bit. So house with spider legs, not quite. So how about remove spider from the image completely? So it won't even be tempted to make a spider. It will just make what we want in theory. All right, queuing the prompt again. Run. Anyway, so hopefully kind of giving you a good idea of how a three kind of pass setup can work. You make the images you want to make. Now, if you tried to prompt this kind of setup, you could successfully do these things. They can be prompted in one go, but sometimes it might be really tough as well to do. And if you have this setup where you have something first which works, and then you push it to the next stage, you can make sure that the composition is going to be what you're after, and more natural to like the original image. Like if you had a dog standing on a hill and then you wanted it to be something else, say a dog-shaped machine standing on a hill. Now, if you tried to do a dog-shaped machine standing on a hill, it might work, but it's not necessarily going to be posed in the shape of a dog. So if you do this kind of this way, you can kind of push it even more, give it more control, and push it towards where you want it to be. Alright, so towards the end, we now have a house with many spider legs and claws as well. And it should be refined into the final step now. You can see it's got pretty high quality. We've got some fur, we've got dangly bits, and so on. And so, yeah, that's how you can make some really cool images. Alright, we have now reached the end of the video, and you have seen how to make a spider house thing. So, the message that I wanted to tell you is that I have a Discord now. And the Discord is basically, it's a little community where you can get in touch with me, other creators. Maybe you can get in touch with people who have similar problems with you, discuss things with people, learn about stuff just kind of as a community, gain links to certain kinds of resources, even my workflows, my tutorials. There's all kinds of stuff on there, and hopefully if you guys join, you'll get something out of it and maybe help me along the way, learn what kind of needs you have for learning tutorials. Yeah, just somewhere to communicate between us. And yeah, I hope to see you there. Keep it clean though. I don't have many moderators and stuff, but I do like people to have a very safe place to communicate. So please be nice to each other in there. Otherwise, I might not be able to run it because I can't moderate things too well at the moment until I get some moderators kind of sorted out. Anyway, so Discord. I hope to see you there.